Hi, I'm Daniel Likis.
And this is Mick, the Doctor of Digital.
Welcome to Music 101. Another week, another great episode. And 1968, the year of the fuss was less. How music, protests, and culture exploded.
Interesting year. This was a year the West looked in the mirror and saw its soul on fire. So, to introduce 1968, some years tick by like the slow turning of a clock. And then there are years like 1968, a year that didn't simply unfold, but exploded. A year when the world wasn't so much spinning as it was convulsing. And in America, the epicenter of the Western world, it felt as if the soul of the nation was being tested in the fire. At 15, I could feel the electricity crackling in the air, like the whole world was plugged into something dangerous and new. Mom and Dad watched in stunned confusion, trying to make sense of the chaos spilling out of the evening news and when reading the newspaper. A generation no longer content to inherit a world built by their fathers decided to set fire to the blueprints. From the smoky battlefields of Vietnam to the bullet-riddled balconies of Memphis, the dreams of post-war peace and prosperity seemed to be unraveling in real time. In January, the Tet Offensive shattered the illusion that the Vietnam War was nearing its end. Young Americans watched the carnage on TV, their trust in the government bleeding out beside the fallen. By April, Martin Luther King Jr. lay dying on a balcony in Memphis, a modern prophet silenced by assassin's bullet. The riots that followed weren't just about one man. They were about generations of broken promises and the aching hope for something better. June didn't bring healing. It brought another body. Robert F. Kennedy gunned down in a Los Angeles hotel kitchen just as he was stepping into the role of national healer. With the death of Bobby, the last great hope for a Kennedy Camelot was buried beneath the glare of television cameras and flickering campaign posters. In 1968, American politics were thrown into turmoil, marked by deep divisions and intense conflict. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago became a flashpoint for national unrest. Protests erupted both inside and outside the convention hall, fueled by deep divisions over the Vietnam War and civil rights. The streets of Chicago witnessed violent clashes between demonstrators and police, leading to widespread media coverage and public outcry. The phrase, "the whole world is watching," echoed through the city, capturing the intense global attention on the events unfolding. In the aftermath, the Democratic Party faced significant challenges. The convention's chaos and the party's inability to unify its base contributed to a loss of public confidence. This disillusionment paved the way for Richard Nixon's victory in the presidential election. Nixon's campaign, which emphasized law and order, resonated with a nation weary of turmoil. He won the presidency with 301 electoral votes, defeating Democratic Hubert Humphrey, who secured 191 electoral votes. The election marked a significant shift in American politics, signaling the decline of the New Deal coalition and the rise of a new conservative era. But it wasn't just America. The tremors shook the globe. In Paris, students and workers united in rebellion, nearly toppling the de Gaulle government in May's seismic protests. In Prague, the hope of socialism with a human face was crushed beneath Soviet tanks during the August invasion. While in Mexico City, student demonstrators were massacred just days before the Olympics would distract the world with athletic spectacle. The Old West, meaning not just the American frontier, but the moral, philosophical, and religious underpinnings of Western civilization, were cracking under the strain of its contradictions. The civil rights movement, the sexual revolution, second-wave feminism, and the student protests all tugged at the threads of a once cohesive cultural fabric. It's as if the world's younger sons and daughters were asking, with both love and fury, "What kind of world are you leaving us?" 1968 wasn't just a year, it was a crucible. And what emerged from that fire still shapes the way we live, vote, argue, sing, and mourn. This wasn't the death of the West, but it was a violent birth of something new, with all the agony and awe that birth entails. As we reflect on the legacy of that pivotal year, we're not just peering into the past, we're standing in the ache and echo of decisions, protests, and prayers that still ripple into our present. Because sometimes, if you want to understand the fire we're living in now, you've got to trace it back to the first spark. In conclusion, and the long and winding tale of the modern West, 1968 might be the moment the fuse was lit, and everything since has been a part of that blast wave.
1968. Thank you so much for your legacy to the world. Until now, we still talking about it. Many say 1968 was the year the needle finally dropped hard. Nothing would you ever be the same. Can you explain that phrase, Mr. Mac?
The Beatles had long since performing live, but in 1968 they gave the world the sprawling Fractured White Album, a mirror of the chaos and contradictions around them. David Bowie, Leonard Herrimone was just starting, and across the Atlantic, Bowie was still an oddity in obscurity, while a guy named Ian Hunter was playing in bands and cutting his teeth on the circuits that would one day birth Mott the Hoople. Hunter can be heard on background vocals and playing bass with the at last the 1958 rock and roll show featuring Ian Hunter, I Can't Drive. In conclusion, even music, that sacred refuge, was morphing into something more urgent, more electric, more desperate, more political.
More political indeed. The 1968 was, well, contributed a lot. What pop music leading the revolution or simply reflecting it?
Well, this is one of the key tensions of 1968, the interplay between art and action, sound and substance. It opens a conversation about whether artists like Dylan, the Beatles, Daniel's favorite artists, Aretha Franklin, Hendrix, and the Doors were driving cultural shifts or simply voicing the collective tremors already rumbling under the surface. We can then explore how Street Fighting Man by the Rolling Stones or Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud by James Brown work both as music and as manifestos. Some songs entertain, some songs provoke, and then there are songs like Street Fighting Man, songs that ignite. When the Rolling Stones released it in August 1968, the world was tittering on the edge. Paris was burning, Chicago was boiling, and Prague was buckling under tanks. This wasn't just a single, it was a soundtrack for the streets. Musically, it's a paradox. It rages without rage. Built on a distorted acoustic guitar recorded through a cheap cassette deck, the sound is raw, lo-fi, and oddly claustrophobic. Keith Richards' guitar growls, but not in the expected electric thunder. It crackles like an underground transmission. Charlie Watts' drums stomp like boots on concrete, and there's no bass guitar. That's not a mistake, that's a statement. The rhythm guitar is the rebellion. This is rock music stripped of excess, left with nothing but nerve endings and noise. And then there's the voice. Mick Jagger sings as if reading a dispatch from the front. He says, "Everywhere I hear the sound of marching, charging feet, boy." But just as the revolution feels ready to ignite, he undercuts it. But what can a poor boy do except to sing for a rock and roll band? Is that a surrender or a smirk? A lament or a warning shot? That's the brilliance. It's both. Jagger's lyric captures the tensions of 1968 perfectly, caught between street-level chaos and stadium-stage spectacle. It's a shrug and a call to arms. It's a get-out-of-jail card for the artist and a mirror held up to the listener. And the establishment knew it. Radio stations banned it, not because it was explicit, but because it was true. They feared it might incite violence. Maybe Street Fighting Man did have that kind of power. Because back then, music wasn't just background noise, it was a signal. It didn't just reflect the times, it moved them. There's something dangerous about a song that names what everyone else is too nervous to say out loud. And this one did. It didn't tell you what side to pick, but it made sure you knew there was a side. It didn't need to scream to be heard. It buzzed like an exposed wire in the wall. Low, urgent, impossible to ignore. And here's the truth. The authorities weren't scared because it was loud. They were scared because it was right. Or maybe it just named what was already happening and dared to put a beat under it. The refrain, "Summer's here and the time is right for fighting in the street, boy," flips the Motown classic Dancing in the Street on its head. Where Martha and the Vandellas gave you joy, the Stones gave you judgment. This wasn't a revolution in fashion. This was a revolution as echo. Rock and roll reporting live from the barricades. So what is Street Fighting Man? It's a manifesto disguised as a rock song. It's punk before punk had a passport. It's the Stones saying, we're not marching in the streets, but we sure know well what's going on out there. It's the sound of 1968 breaking apart. and daring you to do something about it. Then we have James Brown's Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. This isn't about cultural identity. It's about the call to excel, to build, to lead as Americans. The song is too easy to misinterpret because of the simple chorus, but Soul Brother #1 saw the bigger picture. It wasn't just a beat he dropped, it was a declaration, a bomb with a groove. JB didn't just sing it in 1968, he kicked the door down and dared a generation to walk through it. Because Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud wasn't just a simple hit, it was a gospel of grit. This was more than pride in skin. This was pride in standing tall. Brown was after building businesses, sharpening minds, and striding confidently into classrooms, courtrooms, and city halls with shoulders back and eyes clear. This wasn't a cry for chaos. It was a blueprint. Brown wasn't telling Black America to burn it down. He was saying, own it. Own your block. Own your education. Own your work ethic. Own your excellence. It was music as motion, beat-driven, brass shouting, no excuses soul, and it hit like a sermon wrapped in rhythm. In conclusion, because the man didn't just say it loud and proud, he meant it and lived it.
Indeed. And Mr. Meek, what artists and pop anthems best captured the tensions and hope of that year's cultural explosion, and why that is still resonate today?
This was the year bubblegum pop danced uneasily beside protest and poetry. The Monkees were still smiling on television, but behind the scenes, even they were trying to break out from their prefab box with Head, a surrealistic, psychedelic film and soundtrack that confused fans and baffled critics. Classical Gas, Mason Williams. Released in 1968 on the Mason Williams phonograph record, Classical Gas became a defining instrumental of the year, peaking at #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hitting #1 on the Easy Listening chart for 3 weeks. Its intricate guitar melodies, backed by an orchestral arrangement from Mike Post, resonated widely, selling over 1 million copies and earning 3 Grammy Awards in 1968 Best Instrumental Composition, Best Instrumental Performance, and Best Instrumental Arrangement. The song's innovative structure, 12 segments instead of the typical pop song's 4, mirror the experimental spirit of 1968's music scene, where artists were pushing boundaries. As Ian Hunter might put it in Ghost, I'm standing in a room full of ghosts, turntables spinning around, capturing the haunting, transformative power of music in that era. Classical Gas is a cultural artifact, reflecting a time when music was evolving to reflect a restless, searching society. Hey Jude, the Beatles. In 1968, as the world erupted with protests and cultural upheaval, the Beatles' Hey Jude emerged as a 7-minute anthem of solace and resilience, perfectly encapsulating the year's turbulent spirit. Released in August, it became the best-selling single of the year, holding the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 chart for 9 weeks with its heartfelt lyrics, originally written by Paul McCartney to comfort John Lennon's son Julian during his parents' divorce, offering a universal balm for a fractured world. The song's extended coda, a communal sing-along recorded with a 36-piece orchestra, mirrored the collective unity of yearning for unity among chaos, like the global protests from Paris to Chicago demanding change. Young Girl, Gary Puckett in the Union Gap. In 1968, as protests and cultural tensions ignited globally, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap's Young Girl struck a provocative chord, reaching #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and reflecting the era's complex interplay of innocence and rebellion. Released in February, the song's haunting melody and lyrics about a man wrestling with an inappropriate attraction to a younger person, set against the band's Civil War-era uniforms, captured a dark undercurrent of the sexual revolution, clashing with the year's idealistic protests from Vietnam to the streets of Paris. Its commercial success, selling over 1 million copies, underscored a cultural paradox. As society grappled with liberation and moral boundaries, Young Girl thus became a mirror to the 1968's explosive contradiction, blending pop's seductive allure with the unease of a world on the brink. Touch Me, The Doors. In late 1968, as the fuse of cultural and political unrest burned brightly, The Doors' Touch Me, released in December from their album The Soft Parade, captured the era's raw, sensual energy and yearning for connection amid chaos, peaking at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Jim Morrison's commanding vocals, paired with the song's bold brass section and playful flirtation, "I'm Gonna Love You Till the Heavens Stop the Rain," offered a hedonistic escape, reflecting the countercultural's defiance of societal norms during a year marked by protest all over the world. The track's provocative tone, blending romance with rebellion, echoed the spirit of 1968's cultural explosion. Touch Me thus became a sonic emblem of a generation pushing boundaries, seeking intimacy and freedom in a world teetering on the edge. People Got to Be Free, the Rascals. In the fiery crucible of 1968, the Rascals' People Got to Be Free soared as a defiant anthem of unity and liberation, hitting number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 5 weeks in August and selling over 4 million copies. Written by Felix Cavallari and Eddie Brigatti as a response to the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, the song's gospel-tinged plea for freedom all the world over, so easy to see, people everywhere just want to be free, resonated deeply with a generation grappling with Vietnam War protests, racial tensions, and global uprisings from Paris to Mexico City. Its upbeat melody and earnest lyrics captured the year's explosive hope for change. People Got to Be Free became a clarion call, blending pop's accessibility with the raw spirit of protest that defined 1968's cultural upheaval. Stone Soul Picnic, The Fifth Dimension. In the transformative heat of 1968, The Fifth Dimension Stone Soul Picnic, released in May from their album of the same name, offered a dreamy, soulful escape that peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, embodying the year's cultural explosion through its blend of psychedelic optimism and communal yearning. Written by Laura Nero, the song's lush harmonies and surreal imagery, "Surrey down to a Stone Soul Picnic, there'll be lots of time and wine," captured the countercultural's desire for freedom and connection by envisioning a utopian gathering amid societal unrest. Its breezy vibe contrasted with the year's darker tensions, yet mirrored the hope for a better world. Stone Soul Picnic thus became a melodic snapshot of 1968's duality, protest-fueled chaos and longing for peace, inviting listeners to dream of harmony in a fractured time. Born to Be Wild, Steppenwolf. In the combustible atmosphere of 1968, this song, released in May from their self-titled debut album, roared into the zeitgeist, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and becoming an enduring anthem of rebellion that perfectly mirrored the year's cultural and protest-fueled explosion. Get your motor running, head out on the highway, looking for adventure, and whatever comes our way, captured the restless spirit of a generation challenging authority. Its raw energy, famously featured in the 1969 film Easy Rider, resonated the era's defiance. Born to Be Wild became a sonic album of 1968's untamed freedom, amplifying the year's revolutionary fervor with every rev of its metaphorical engine. Fire, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. In the incendiary landscape of the year, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown's, released in June and climbing to number 2 on the UK singles chart and number 1 in Canada, ignited the year's cultural and protest-driven explosion with its theatrical ferocity. Peaking at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, written by Arthur Brown and Vincent Crane, the song's apocalyptic lyrics, "I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire," paired with Brown's wild vocals and flaming helmet performance, mirrored the era's volatile spirit, channeling a primal scream against societal constraints. Its avant-garde energy reflected the countercultural's push for liberation. Fire became a blazing symbol of 1968's unrest, fusing pop innovation with the year's burning desire for change and chaos. Green Tambourine, the Lemon Pipers. In the kaleidoscope turbulence of 1968, this song peaked at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in February, encapsulating the year's cultural explosion with its psychedelic whimsy, offering a dreamy counterpoint to the era's fiery protest. The song's jangling tambourine and trippy lyrics, "Drop your silver in my tambourine, help a poor man fill a pretty dream," reflected the counterculture's longing for escapism and freedom, resonating with the spirit of rebellion seen in anti-Vietnam War marches, global push for social change. Its bubblegum psychedelic blend captured 68's duality of playful idealism and underlying unrest. Green Tambourine thus became a shimmering artifact of the year's cultural shift, blending pop's accessibility with the dreamy defiance of a generation seeking to break free. Finally, I will briefly mention the Beach Boys, in particular Brian Wilson, since he recently passed away. I'm sure we'll dedicate an entire episode to him. The Beach Boys' top-selling song of 1968 was Do It Again, which stalled at number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and entered the charts in July of the year. Ironically, while it only reached number 20 in the U.S., Do It Again became much more successful internationally, peaking at number 1 on the UK singles chart, becoming the band's second number 1 hit in the UK after their iconic Good Vibrations. Do It Again was the band's first attempt at revisiting the surf rock sound they had abandoned since the LP All Summer Long. It topped the Australian chart as well. In conclusion, artists like the Beatles with Hey Jude, Steppenwolf with Born to Be Wild best captured the tension and hope of 68's cultural explosion, their anthems resonating today because they channel universal struggles for unity, empowerment, and justice that continue to echo in our world.
Yes, and thank you so much for that echo, people. Thank you so much. 1968. Did soul music give the movement its voice, or it's a heartbeat?
This opens a soulful line of inquiry into whether artists like Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding, and Marvin Gaye were merely echoing the cries of the streets or actively empowering them with rhythm, pride, and purpose. We can speculate. Was soul music in 1968 a balm, a rallying cry, or both, a sanctuary and a sword? Or can a groove generation change this entire world or get it through the day? Aretha's Think moved from personal plea to cultural demand in the heat of civil rights and feminist awakenings. Let's consider an invitation to the audience to speculate on the healing and motivational power of the soul in a year of assassinations, riots, and shattered dreams, and whether the emotional power was revolutionary in itself. Meanwhile, through the grapevine, Marvin Gaye was quietly beginning to ask deeper questions in Motown's corridors. The Jackson 5 had just signed with the label, and a young Michael was about to change the shape of pop forever, even if few noticed it yet. Petula Clark sang of Kiss Me Goodbye, while Dusty Springfield prepared to head to Memphis, proof that even pop's polished voices were drifting towards soul and sorrow. In 1968, soul music stopped just making you dance and started making you march. Aretha Franklin, the Queen, released Lady Soul and Aretha Now, and each track was a masterclass in power and poise. Otis Redding's posthumous Dock of the Bay felt like a ghost speaking from just beyond the waves. Grazing in the Grass, Hugh Masekela. That was a song that fit into the 68 landscape like a sunbeam through storm clouds, bright, joyous, and wordlessly radical. While much of the music of that year was protest-driven and lyrically charged, James Brown demanding dignity, the Rolling Stones shouting rebellion, Dylan retreating then re-emerging, Masekela's Grazing in the Grass was a different kind of statement. An instrumental, it didn't shout, it shined. Here was a South African jazz trumpeter living in exile during apartheid, topping the U.S. charts with a breezy, infectious groove that sounded like freedom. The song doesn't carry an explicit message, but its very presence on American airwaves in 1968, a year thick with racial tension and political unrest, was the message. America was open to global sounds of freedom. It said, joy is resistance, excellence is global, and you don't have to shout to be heard. That song fits into 68 not as a battlefield report like Say It Loud, but as a beautiful reminder of what the fight was for, a world where Americans opened their doors for an African horn and everyone could dance to the same beat. Finally, we should mention Sly Stone briefly. We'll be looking at Sly in more detail. In fact, an entire episode will be dedicated to him because unfortunately he also passed away. Stone's top-selling song in 68 was Dance to the Music, which netted Sly and the Family Stone their first top 10 hit in the spring of 1968. The song was influential in the formation and popularization of the musical subgenre of psychedelic soul and helped lay the groundwork for the development of funk music. Dance to the Music was a breakthrough moment for Sly and the Family Stone, establishing them as a major force in popular music and setting the stage for their later success appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show, and at Woodstock. The song was recorded at the assistance of CBS executive Clive Davis, who wanted Sly to make his sound more pop-friendly, and it proved to be exactly the commercial breakthrough the band needed. In conclusion, whatever the answer, 1968 proved that soul wasn't just background music. It was message music, pushing forward an American movement and giving the struggle a sound.
Message music, and again, 1968. Thank you so much for that year. While the cities burn and the students march, what story was country music telling and who was listening, Mr. Mick?
This question digs into the heart of country music's role in 1968. Often overlooked in the narrative of protest music, yet deeply reflective of a different kind of American experience, rural, working class, and aching with its grief and pride. We should consider, was Merle Haggard's Mama Tried a personal lament or a generational indictment? How did Johnny Cash, standing in Folsom Prison with a mic in his hand and the devil in his eyes, speak to forgotten men in a forlorn America? In a year that tore the nation apart, was country music holding something together or holding something back? Did country music in '68 offer resistance, reassurance, or reckoning? This frames the genre not just as a reaction to countercultural upheaval, but as a cultural world of its own, full of Sunday mornings, prison walls, dusty roads, and immoral codes that didn't always fix the revolution or fit it, but it couldn't be ignored. Even Nashville couldn't remain untouched by the shifting sands. Johnny Cash, scarred by his demons, stood in front of inmates at Folsom Prison in January and delivered a raw, rebellious performance that reminded the country of its underbelly had a voice. At Folsom Prison, that peaked at #1 on the Billboard Country Albums chart, with Folsom Prison Blues capturing the raw energy of long-lost men in heartland America. Cash's gravelly voice singing, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," wasn't just a song, it was a declaration of empathy for the downtrodden, resonating with rural listeners who felt sidelined by the urban protest. Merle Haggard's Mama Tried brought Bakersfield grit to the national stage, a reminder that not all rebels wore beads and fringe, some wore denim and steel-toed boots. Merle Haggard's song, released in July, reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Country single chart, a personal lament about a wayward son. "I turned 21 in prison, doing life without parole." It doubled as a generational indictment, reflecting the struggles of working-class families and a rapidly changing nation. Was it a cry of regret or a subtle critique of systemic failures? And while Glenn Campbell's Wichita Lineman sounded sweet on the radio, it held a melancholy grandeur, a loneliness that echoed the nation's fractured spirit. That peaked at #1 on the Billboard Country chart in December, offered a different tone. Its lyrics, "I hear you singing in the wire, I can hear you through the wine," captured a loneliness, a working man's quiet longing amid the chaos. Country music in '68 spoke to those who weren't marching in the streets, but were still grappling with change. Farmers, factory workers, and small-town families tuning their radios to stations playing Cash and Haggard. So in '68, did it offer resistance, reassure, or reckoning? It was a bit of all three. Cash resisted the eraser of the marginalized, Haggard reckoned with the personal and societal failures, and Campbell reassured listeners that their solitude mattered. As St. Augustine might say, reflecting on the human condition in Confessions, our hearts are restless until they rest in you. In conclusion, country music became a resting place for those seeking meaning among the upheaval, holding together a moral code that was not a raucous revolution, but struggled all the same.
Mr. Mick, by 1968, or as the streets erupted and the nation fractured, was jazz still the sounds of freedom, or had it become the scream of something breaking?
This question touches on the spiritual and revolutionary depths of jazz in that year, a genre both steeped in tradition and restless to transcend it. Jazz was no longer just cool, it was cosmic, chaotic, and prophetic. Coltrane's absence was louder than any trumpet. He died in '67, but his influence, especially A Love Supreme, still haunted the scene. It was the avant-garde energy of Ornette Coleman, Archie Shepp, Pharoah Sanders an answer to violence or a mirror of it? Did jazz in 68 retreat into art or rise into protest? 68 in jazz was a kaleidoscope. Miles Davis was on the verge of going electric. Nina Simone was testifying. She found renewed energy in 68, her voice a fierce advocate of American justice, echoing the riots following Martin Luther King's assassination. Sun Ra was building spaceships out of saxophones. It wasn't background music, it was frontline art. Jazz in 68 was a state of shimmering defiance and reinvention. Davis was on the cusp of his electric revolution, releasing Miles in the Sky, pointing towards fusion jazz that would soon blow the genre wide open. Meanwhile, John Coltrane had passed just a year earlier, but his posthumous cosmic music release with his wife Alice Coltrane sounded like a sermon from another dimension. Grief turned into transcendence. Jazz in 68 was less about smoke-filled lounges and more about spiritual exploration and sonic freedom. Jazz artists weren't interested in staying inside the lines. They were painting the stars. Jazz was spiritual depth and revolutionary defiance, no longer just cool, but cosmic and prophetic. And with this, we can look at some of the leading tracks. John Coltrane's Lord Help Me to Be Me resonated with spiritual longing. Pharoah Sanders pushed boundaries further, rejecting convention. Sanders' Karma, recorded in 68 with its freeform intensity, Sun Ra's cosmic explorations in Atlantis, and Coleman's avant-garde New York Is Now were not just music, they were frontline art reflecting the violence and hope of that particular era. They wondered about the American dream, that it was just dissonance or defiance. It was a new dream, one where freedom meant breaking the old modes, where dissonance became a form of protest and defiance a path to transcendence. In conclusion, jazz was a vital source of creativity during a chaotic period.
By 1968, was rock still rebellion or had become the revolution soundtrack, Mr. Mick?
This question invites readers and listeners to consider how rock evolved from teen scream to political firepower. The Beatles were no longer singing, I Want to Hold Your Hand. They were singing Revolution. The Rolling Stones traded Satisfaction for Street Fighting Man. And Hendrix didn't just play at Monterey. He torched his guitar and made it burn. We should consider this provocative question. Was 68 the year rock grew up or finally exploded? Rock in 68 wasn't just background noise. It was front page news. From NC5 chanting Kick Out the Jams, listen to the song, language advisory warning, to Janis Joplin pouring her soul into a microphone like it was a Molotov cocktail. Rock had got swagger and stars. Can frame it this way. 68 was the thunder of a nation cracking open. This was the year rock put away childish things and picked up the weight of the world. Jimi Hendrix released Electric Ladyland, and it wasn't just a record. It was a cosmic scripture, bending notes the way prophets handled time. Hendrix released Electric Ladyland, peaking at #1 on the Billboard 200, with tracks like Voodoo Child, Slight Return, a sonic rebellion that echoed the year's protest. The Rolling Stones dropped Beggar's Banquet, beginning their dark, decadent descent into myth. Sympathy for the Devil was a warning or confession of the era's moral ambiguity, reaching #1 in the UK. Cream's Wheels of Fire proved that even a power trio could sound like a volcanic eruption. The LP peaked at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart with Sunshine of Your Love, capturing the raw energy of 68's unrest. Iron Butterfly expanded rock into Baroque, contrapuntal, psychedelia, and acid rock, all in one 17-minute song, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. And somewhere on the American plains, Creedence Clearwater Revival dropped their debut, raw, swampy, and prophetic, the voice of a coming storm. CC&R's self-titled debut, released in July, put out I Put a Spell on You when the storm hit. Deep Purple's Hush, Status Quo's Pictures of Matchstick Men, and the Grateful Dead's live performance at the Crystal Ballroom in Portland added to the year's rock tapestry, each a testament to the genre's diversity and intensity. The Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash hit #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 was a live wire of energy, its riff a call to action. Live in the studio video version, and several versions. So when Music 68 wasn't just a soundtrack, it was scripture, sacrament, and scream. It was Aretha in the pulpit, Hendrix in the fire, and Cash in the cell block. The world was shaking, and the needle kept spinning. Building off a Quora post about 1968 demonstrates the variety and excellence of the performances that year. Regardless of the age, rock music from just about any year can be not only timeless but also great. In a certain year, like say 1968, it can be awesome, especially if they come from these artists. Deep Purple, The Beatles, Aretha Franklin, and The Doors were just some of the numerous artists who created awesome rock music in 68. In conclusion, the music was an anecdote to a tumultuous year that saw the assassination of two important public figures, an unpopular war, and a tense presidential election.
Mr. Mick, in conclusion, what is the legacy of 1968?
In 1968, rock, soul, country, jazz, and pop didn't just reflect 1968, they moved it, giving voice to the voiceless and rhythm to the restless. So, which artists and anthems best captured the tension and hope of that year's cultural explosion, and why do they still resonate today? The Beatles' Hey Jude offered solace, a communal prayer for unity. James Brown's Say It Loud demanded excellence, a blueprint for American capitalism. Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison performance spoke to the marginalized, while Miles Davis's Miles in the Sky pointed to a future of sonic freedom. These sounds resonate because they tap into universal struggles, hope, success, freedom that echo in today's movements. Ian Hunter's Long Time captures this bridge between past and present. He says, "It's been a long time. You've been going your way, I've been going mine." We're still navigating the blast wave of 1968, a year that didn't just shape how we live, vote, argue, sing, and mourn. It birthed the modern West in all its messy, beautiful complexity. So I ask you, listeners, readers, to reflect, what does a musical 1968 mean to you? In conclusion, share your memories of that year or its echoes in your life, because sometimes understanding the fire we're in now means tracing it back to the first spark.
1968 indeed. Thank you for your legacy to the world. And 1968 was the detonation point of the modern world. Across continents, the year erupted in convergence of road defiance and cultural metamorphosis. Students barricaded Persian streets and crafting revolutions. Vietnam Tet offensive shattered illusions of American invisibility. Again, Mr. Mick, another great episode. And would you like to plug in something?
If you wouldn't mind, you can always listen to the Doctor of Digital podcast. I'm Mick, the Doctor of Digital book doctor. You can join me on Substack. You can join me on School, SKOOL. Also pick up a couple of volumes, Burning America and On Track. Ian Hunter, available on Amazon. Listen in and hope to join and talk to you at some point.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Mick, because if you support him, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself, more and more empowering authors to come. And please do listen to our baby podcast, Mental Health 101, because Mental Health 101 is created to empower mental health awareness. Mr. Mick, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend. Until next time, Deus Vult.
Monica people, see you soon.